Liz Truss voted to remain. Is this a mistake, this appointment by Boris Johnson?
No, I don't think it's a mistake by Boris Johnson. The question of whether she was a Remain or Leave supporter is completely irrelevant. We've left the EU, although the consequences of leaving the EU are still with us and largely unresolved. Whether Liz Truss can do a good job or not for him, I have no idea, but she's certainly a perfectly suitable appointment. The problem he had is that Lord Frost fell out with him about the direction of travel of the economic policies that ought to be pursued. And that was inherent in what happened during the referendum, because it brought together two very different groups of people, one of whom, I think a minority group, wanted Britain to turn itself into the Singapore of the Northeast Atlantic with low tax, low state support, and limited public services, actually, if they want to achieve their aim. Whereas the other people who were helping them took a very different view, which was that they wanted almost to go back to the position we were in before we joined the EEC. They wanted a country that had high levels of public services, was quite protectionist in its attitude to the world outside. And this incompatibility has been around ever since. And seeing that Boris Johnson's been facing COVID and spending vast sums of public money in order to deal with that, and shows no sign of exercising any sort of fiscal restraint, one can see why people like Lord Frost are very unhappy.
OK, let me ask you then about that kind of fiscal restraint or otherwise. On the front page, the wraparound on every single national newspaper. Here's The Guardian, dare I say. I would almost put my rubber gloves on to hold it up, but never mind. So here's the advert, get boosted now, it says. But it's the same on whether you look at the newspaper, the Telegraph, the Times. Every single one of them has an NHS advert. Is this a wise spending of government money?
Well, getting the population vaccinated is clearly a wise form of government money. But in any case, it's the form of government money that the public...
But wouldn't it be more effective if the Prime Minister came onto this show, and indeed others like it, and talked about it, rather than hiding away wherever he is, disappearing away from the scrutiny of public and just sticking adverts on? That costs millions upon millions of pounds that we, the taxpayer, are going to have to pay back, whereas him coming to do his job and talking to people like us would cost nothing.
Well, hold on. We're talking about two slightly different things here. Do I think it's sensible to get the whole population vaccinated, and that people are very mistaken if they fail to take up the vaccination opportunity? Yes. Okay. What's the best way of doing that? That's another matter. Advertising on the front of a national newspaper may be a mistake. I don't know. And it might be better if the Prime Minister came on your programme. That I certainly don't disagree with. But both are worthwhile if they are contributing to getting people vaccinated.
Let me ask you about that picture. Was it a party or was it a work event taking place in the Downing Street Garden in May 2020?
It looks to me as if it is a social event. Now, I'm going to wait and see what the outcome is of the inquiry that's being carried out. And one can see how working together and being allowed to work together can shift into social banter. But I must say, the photographs certainly suggest that it's a social event and not work.
Because I was going to say that if it is a work event, what's Carrie doing there?
Well, indeed, she isn't part of the work team at all. So to that extent, it does look as if the rules have been breached.
If the rules have been breached, should Boris Johnson and indeed others resign?
Well, I think Boris Johnson should resign. It's quite clear that it isn't just the breach of these rules, which is the problem. The problem with the Prime Minister is that he breaches a very large number of rules and he lies about it. And it's the breakdown in trust in the Prime Minister, which is the really key issue, because people don't trust him anymore. And it's not just a question of the public in the street. He's also not trusted by our international partners, including key partners like the United States, which he says are so important to our relationship. They simply regard him as mendacious and untrustworthy and somebody they can't do business with. Now, that's a very serious situation for our country to be in. And the Conservative Party, if Boris Johnson won't go of his own accord, it's the Conservative MPs who've got to face up to this reality and take the hard decisions.
OK, who would be a better leader in place of Boris Johnson?
I'm sure that there are a number of people who could do it. And indeed, there may be a number of people who I don't even know who they are who might be able to do it. And my colleagues in the Conservative Party would be capable of identifying them. Mr. Johnson is not the only pebble on the beach.
He may not be the only pebble on the beach, but he is an election winner. And your party did support him as leader. And I still have a slight problem with your support of Liz Truss, having been a Remainer, if you like, and then taking that brief in the same way that Theresa May never really managed to grasp hold of that brief in an effective way that took the country with her.
Well, I just disagree with you. There are many criticisms that might be made of Liz Truss. I personally thought that she was a very poor Lord Chancellor when she held that office. But that's some time ago, and it may be she was just a round peg in a square hole, and that was not a good post for her to hold. But the fact that she may have supported Remain seems to me to be entirely and completely irrelevant. And unless the Conservative Party gets over that, then frankly, I think its future is going to be very doubtful indeed. It's worth bearing in mind that on the basis of the voting, 48% of the population did not wish to leave the EU, and there's not much sign those 48% are reconciled to it.
It does seem extraordinary that the Labour Party have been pretty silent on pretty much everything, and when they do speak, it's Captain Hindsight at his best, and yet they're ahead in the polls. That's pretty serious for the Conservative Party, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The Labour Party is in pieces in many ways. It's a coalition of interest between not even a coalition of interest, a coalition between two groups who seem to me to have increasingly little common interest, and that's Keir Starmer's problem. But the fact that the public have put Labour ahead is a pretty telling indication of a complete collapse in faith in what the Conservative government's doing. And the cause of that collapse, the central cause of it, is the Prime Minister.
OK, just finally to you, Sajid Javid has hinted at new COVID curbs even before Christmas. If he were to introduce them, would you support him?
If he decides that we have to have further COVID curbs, I will probably curse under my breath. But yes, I will say that if that is what is necessary and is judged to be necessary, then we're just going to have to lump it. It's not something I particularly wish to see happen. Because I think that the country's economy and its social activities and the social consequences of another lockdown would be very serious. But equally, there is a responsibility towards public health. So I'd look very carefully at what Sajid Javid has to say.
Just finally, why is the data coming from government so poor? Why will we not be told how many people who are being admitted to hospital with COVID? Why are we not being told whether they're vaccinated, how old they are? Why are we not being told whether people have died from or with COVID? Surely if we had that data, the public would be far better able to judge whether or not and what measures are required.
I couldn't agree more. It would be very desirable to have that data, and it would increase public confidence, and it would also help the public to understand the best ways of trying to prevent this virus from spreading. And also, we have to face up to the fact that the principal reason, it seems to me, increasingly why we're having to take measures is because of the number of people who failed to get themselves vaccinated.